Josh, thank you for being here.
Good to be with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and I'm a guest in your building as well.
It is a pleasure to host you and spend time with you.
Thank you so much, Josh. We've been friends on social media for a very long time. We met for the first time like a couple of months ago.
Yes, live.
Live, yeah, a month ago. But Josh, you are so into AI.
Yes.
You're also an investor.
Yes.
So tell us more about Lux Capital. What does it do? What's your involvement? Please, we want to learn more.
The most important thing that we do is find the brilliant people who are inventing the future, and we put money behind them to accelerate it. So we are a venture capital firm. We raise money from private investors and sovereign wealth funds and foundations and individuals and universities, and then we deploy that money into startup companies. We always like to say that we believe before other people understand. And so we're trying to understand ourselves, what are the things that the smartest people in the world, who are the computer scientists, the engineers, the biotech, the scientists, thinking that this should exist in 3 or 4 or 5 years, and how do we make it so? And so about a third of what we do, we manage $5.5 billion. Half the team is in New York, and we cover a lot of the East Coast things and things in Europe and in the Mideast, and half the team is in Menlo Park in California, in Silicon Valley, in the birthplace of so much technology and innovation. And we operate as unum lux, what we call one lux, one light. Everybody is a generalist, but about a third of what we do is healthcare. So we do biotech and robotic surgery and med devices, and we find Nobel Prize-winning scientists, and we commercialize their work. And it spans lots of stuff related to life sciences and healthcare. Another third is very serious stuff, aerospace, defense. And that includes both defensive systems and weapon systems. It's air, land, sea, space, cyber, but it covers every domain that you can imagine, and increasingly globally. We started in the US. We're now making investments in the Mideast, in Europe, in Japan, and elsewhere. And then the final third is what we call core technology. And you say, well, what is core technology? For us, it's more defined by the stuff that we don't do. So we do very little in the very crowded areas like internet, social media, mobile, video games, all of which is important, but it's very crowded. And I like to go after things where there's 1 or 2 companies and they are the leaders. And so that might be a non-invasive brain-machine interface. That might be somebody who invented a novel semiconductor for artificial intelligence. Things that sometimes seem like they're science fiction. And we always say that we're closing the gap between sci-fi, something that was imagined in X-Men or Iron Man, or
Like, give me an example.
well, actually, one that is taking place increasingly in UAE. There are, and this is really like mind-blowing, there are 8 billion people on Earth.
Yes.
There's 1.5 billion in India. There's 1.4 billion in China. There's 375 million in the U.S. And in UAE, 10, 12 million?
I would say 11 million.
Yeah, 1.5 million roughly Emiratis, and then...
And the rest are expats, yes.
Okay. And in Saudi, 40...
40 million.
Okay.
20 million Saudis and 10 million expats.
So huge populations, but there are 10 people in outer space. Well, technically 8 now because 2 have been rescued. You just think about that. Just 10 people in outer space, and there's 2 humans that are walking around right now with a genetically engineered pig kidney, an organ that was genetically engineered so that it wouldn't be rejected by the human body, transplanted into a human, and they are alive because of that. 2 people on Earth. And that is one of our companies called eGenesis, where they took cutting-edge genetics and then were able to cultivate organs in pigs without killing the pigs, just removing one of the organs because they produce 2. And then it's called xenotransplantation. Xeno as in like alien, but in this case it's a foreign body. And keeping people alive who otherwise might have died because they're on a transplant list and they are waiting for basically somebody to get into a car crash and die. And I have to tell you, in a recent visit to UAE with Sheikh Abdullah and Sheikh Tahnoon and some others,
Yes.
I am so inspired by their vision. They looked at this particular company. This one's called eGenesis. And they saw the possibility not only for technological change and for leadership in the region and to be able to help heal people globally with something like this, but even domestically where there isn't the culture necessarily of transplantation. And so the mobilization, if this were to have happened in the United States, it would have taken maybe 5 years, 10 years, regulations, all this kind of stuff. And they said, wait a second, we've got the Cleveland Clinic, we've got Hopkins, we've got some of the best transplant surgeons that have been attracted to the region. We've got capital, we've got talent, and we can mobilize all of this very quickly. And we can also look with the religious leaders at what are the fatwas that might be necessary to allow for this. Because in Islam, to say that to save one life is
to save humanity.
And so I just was so inspired by the thoughtfulness with which they looked at the medical practitioners, the capital allocation, the religious and cultural considerations, how do you potentially produce farms in the region, which would be the first time in history, that are producing life-saving organs for humans globally? And that was just mind-blowing that they would have the foresight and the ambition to do something like that. So that's an example of something that seems like it's science fiction, that with the will and the capital and the influence and the forethought can make that science fact.
And it's happening.
Happening.
You're saying it's happening.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the good things about Sheikh Abdullah, he's always saying that we are ready in the UAE to bid farewell to the last oil barrel. And he believes that technology, AI, human resources, this is like the great power for the next generations to come, not only oil. So AI in the UAE, it's a great investment. But you know, when you were speaking, honestly, Joshua, I was thinking that I myself utilized AI to the best, creating bots and machine languages, or creating bots and teaching some bots how to learn, how to do this, how to do that, and on AI. But it seems like this is the minimal, and it seems like there are so many things that we can do with AI. But speaking with AI, do you think that AI would jeopardize some jobs in the markets? Because this is a great concern in some areas, even in the UAE, by the way, in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf. People think that AI will take over. Do you see it this way with all of this innovation that you're talking about in the future that is happening?
Well, let me zoom back for one sec, which is the region, to me, there's a poetic symbolism. A poetic symbolism that when you think about artificial intelligence, you are quite literally, globally, you are quite literally taking sand and turning it into intelligence. You are taking sand, silicon dioxide, the very thing that makes computer chips, that makes the GPUs that you and I might use in gaming, because I know we share a love for that.
We're going to talk about gaming, by the way.
The GPUs, the graphic processing units that were originally used in PlayStation 5 and Xbox, that researchers in computer science repurposed and said, instead of doing rapid construction of polygons to produce images in real time for Grand Theft Auto or Call of Duty and these kinds of games, we can use this to process parallel construction of convolutional neural nets, one of the early incarnations of AI, to be able to do predictions of what the next word might be, which ultimately would lead to this idea of transformers and being able to do large language models for text generation. That started with gaming chips, and those gaming chips came from silicon, and silicon comes from sand. So there's a poetic connection between the sands of the desert and producing super intelligences of the future. Okay, True. So that's number one. Number two, to your question, will AI destroy jobs? Yes, but it creates many more new jobs. And think about the history of technological disruption. When the automated teller machine was created, the ATM, people said, my gosh, this is the end of bank tellers. And what ended up happening is that today there are more bank tellers than there were before the ATM, because it lowered the cost to put ATMs everywhere and people could get money exchange machines, but it freed up those bank tellers to not do low-level cash exchange withdrawals.
Yes.
But to do wealth management and mortgages and financial advisory services. And so now you have more bank tellers doing different kinds of work and getting paid more money than you did back before the ATM existed. Every time a new technology is created, on the one hand, it destroys some old job, because the essence of a technology is increasing the productivity of some function or creating some new capability that didn't exist before. Telephone operators of yesteryear are no longer here. They're no longer taking plugs and putting them in to be able to connect you and I, because we have automated cellular towers invisibly disconnected, not by wires, but through frequency, connecting us at high speed and allowing us to transmit video to your audiences and ours. Those jobs are gone. The elevator operators of the past that were moving our elevators are gone. Pilots increasingly, don't really fly the plane other than for landing and takeoff. Technology has come in and basically democratized those capabilities. Now with AI, I'll give you one example. We love, I think, sci-fi movies and all.
Big fan of Star Wars.
Okay, Star Wars is amazing. Terminator, The Abyss, all of these movies. Just a week ago, one of our companies called Runway ML, which is a group of brilliant technologists, researchers, a group of artists.
ML stands for machine learning.
Correct.
Okay.
And they started this company. When they started, it was really born out of a love of high-tech visualization and imagery. They didn't have a clear business model yet, but very soon it came into form. And what their business model was to take the workflow of Hollywood producers and designers and special effects people that were doing very rote things by hand, like rotoscoping or animation or background removal or special effects generation. Today, they can do full-length movies constructed by 10, 20-second increments of video generation with the highest fidelity. I saw something online just last week, which was this water-like orb, a blob that was morphing and moving.
I think I saw that on X as well.
And I remember saying, I first saw a special effect like this almost 30 years ago in this movie, The Abyss, which was, I think, a James Cameron movie. And the budget for that movie was over $50 million to produce these kinds of special effects. Today, you and I, and the average person listening to you and I talk today, could do that in seconds for
But that
free.
will take away the jobs of the special effects people.
No, it creates endless ability for humans to do one of the great things that we have always done since the dawn of time, which is to tell stories. It democratizes. It gives you and I and millions of people the ability to express their genius and their creativity in ways that might have been locked before. And so when you think about publishing, it used to be in the domains of either the religious edict or the people that control the printing press. Now anybody can go online and share their ideas. Not all those ideas are good, but occasionally you bump into genius that you wouldn't have discovered. You and I discovered each other because of the democratization of the means of producing content
True.
that are effectively free. So yes, AI will destroy some jobs. Truck drivers in the United States, which are a really important job, it will take time, but they will eventually be displaced by autonomous trucks that are driving 24/7.
Yeah, I've seen some in Phoenix, by the way, the automated cars that are self-driving cars also. It will take away Uber. I think it will take away so many drivers.
Waymo, Zoox, which was one of our companies we sold to Amazon for a little over $1 billion. Uber will partner with some of these people. But think about the ability to press a button on your little magic device and conjure a car that comes to you and then takes you to your destination without a driver. If I would have said that to you a generation ago, let alone 70 years ago, you would have said, you're smoking something. You're insane. This is crazy. But it is happening. But what happens is the truck driver who is sitting there driving for 18 hours, like, is that a great life, away from your family? Those people will find new and repurposed jobs. But the beauty of technology is removing humans from the dull, dirty, and dangerous things. Even if you zoom out to something today, there's a new space race between two billionaires. And the region, UAE and Saudi, will play a key role in this, in the provision of capital, in launch capabilities and technological capabilities for going to space. On one end, you have Elon Musk. On the other end, you could say you have Jeff Bezos. And they have competing but very different visions for how we go to space. Musk says we have to colonize Mars. We have to develop long-range capabilities to launch things and ultimately figure out how do we get food and vegetation and atmospheric oxygen and all those kinds of things. Bezos says, that's interesting, but who wants to live on Mars? There's so much beauty on Earth. Why don't we make Earth more beautiful? Let's take our dull, dirty, dangerous factories. Let's take the pollution and get it off planet. And maybe we put the industrial production there and literally do Amazon Prime where you're shipping the stuff back down to Earth. I like that vision better. But both of these.
Shipping it from Mars?
Or not Mars, but outer space. You'll have, we have a company called Varda Space. Okay. Varda Space was premised on this idea that the cost per kilogram to get to space is getting cheaper and cheaper. Meaning the cost, to ship mass up to space. Because you're fighting gravity, you need propulsion, you need jet engines, all this kind of stuff. And so they said, if we're going to produce something in space, it has to inversely have a very high dollar value per kilogram to justify making it in space to come back down. You're not going to make a plastic widget or a pencil in space. That's ridiculous. But maybe you make a very expensive pharmaceutical drug that can only be done in low gravity or zero gravity, where the chemistry allows for it. Or maybe you make some exotic material, a special fiber optic cable. Or maybe you make a special composite that's going to be used for military use. Those are the kinds of thinkings that really creative space engineers are working on. We just did another one. Hasn't even been publicly announced. By the time this comes out, it will be announced so I can share it with you. It's called Reflect Orbital. It's our fund, Lux Capital, and another fund, Sequoia Capital, which is one of the great investors in venture capital history. We backed somebody that spent some time at SpaceX, and they figured out if we could take these very large planes of effectively mylar reflective material, the kind of stuff in a shiny balloon, and stretch it really tight, you can make a mirror. And you can actually launch a satellite, have this thing unfurl, and redirect sunlight at night to parts of the Earth. So if you have a solar farm, the solar energy, you want it to be efficient, but you only get sun for half the day. What if you could have a satellite reflecting sun back down to the solar farms producing electricity 24 hours a day? What if you have a humanitarian disaster and you need sunlight to be able to see what's going on and save people? What if you have a military operation and you want the same thing? The ability to get real sun redirected onto a 5-kilometer region of the Earth is going to be mind-blowing for people. And it seems like science fiction.
Wow, it's mind-blowing. But okay, back to my question. When you, for example, when you talked about some jobs that could be replaced by AI, like ADM. Yes, okay, so ADM, but some people would counter this, and I will give you an example. Some people say, okay, you know what, ADM, there is tedious job, and there is like something more serious that people can focus on. So the ADM machine took the tedious job from the tellers, but they were having more jobs to do. But when it comes to writing, for example,
yes,
there were protests, I think, in Los Angeles by the union, and they protested. And honestly, quite honestly, Joshua, I'll be very honest with you. With AI now, with ChatGPT, Grok, and other tools, you can really write a very good script of a movie. You just have to be a prompt. I think the future job is prompt engineers.
Yes.
You have to be a good prompt engineer that would give a good prompt, and then it will produce a good script. So why would I go to a scriptwriter? I think they are right.
Well, anything...
And they don't have any other thing to add.
Well, storytelling is a timeless thing through humanity.
Okay.
Right? And we use different mediums for that. People 20 years ago bemoaned the rise of computer graphics because you were taking the skill of the animator who page by page meticulously and effortfully is designing the Mickey Mouse cartoon for Disney. And you would look at the
frame by frame.
Frame by frame. And people would buy the individual I forget what they're called, celluline frames, or the sort of clear, where they would design on this to be able to flip. And those things were worth money because they were so rare and scarce. Along comes these GPUs, and Steve Jobs played an early role in this, ultimately Pixar, where you're generating these things by computer. And the craft and the handiwork of the animator is suddenly devalued. And the productivity of the 3D animator that can use computer graphics to be able to do this, not only can they do the two-dimensional stuff, but they can do ray tracing with sophisticated light effects and ripples of water and reproduction of physics. People felt like it's soulless. But think about how many beautiful movies have been produced by Pixar or DreamWorks or their competitors. And I actually think it has opened up new vistas of storytelling, and it's raised the bar. So in screenwriting, yes, the shift has been where I can say, give me a Aaron Sorkin style, fast-paced, high erudite script in the style of West Wing. It
would do a good job.
It would do a pretty good job. And for somebody that didn't see West Wing or wasn't an aficionado, they might say, like, this is really excellent, and I can't tell the difference. But it allows now somebody else to say, well, okay, now we have the script, but what can we do to make it really distinguished, to get an audience, to capture people's attention? And it might be something in the sound design. It might be something in the visuals. But people are going to push the boundaries. I have a friend who started what I think is one of the great companies of the world in storytelling, which is A24, a guy, David Finkel, here in New York. And they did Everything Everywhere All at Once and so many Oscar-winning movies and Moonlight and all these things. But I just saw this movie, Warfare, which was about a 2006 day in Iraq. And it was really about one platoon of Marines and some SEALs that went to support them. And they're very confident, and the day is going great until it turns into a horror story, just horrific. And I have seen a lot of war movies, and we do a lot with the military domestically and globally in our technology investment. I've never seen a war movie like this. And it wasn't the script. It was the storytelling through the sound, which at times were so, as an audience member, overwhelming, the cacophony and the chaos of the moment that put you there, how loud it would get, giving you this feeling, this emotional feeling of discomfort that could sort of find some synchrony with the discomfort of the person who is writhing in pain or screaming or feeling completely overwhelmed or shell-shocked. I never experienced a war movie like that before. And it was in part because...
It's called Warfare.
Warfare. It comes out, I think it just came out on Friday. And I'd seen a special preview last week in IMAX. And there were times where I was viscerally nauseated, viscerally discomforted. But when you zoom out, you say, wow, this is powerful technology that they're using to tell the story in a different way. And it wasn't about the script. It was about still finding those elements of humanity to pull out of you to provoke this emotional reaction. And by the way, amazing technology still does the same thing. People always say that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. When I pick up my phone, there are still little animations of how the iPhone works, little alerts or notifications that are done in this very magical way that make me feel a sense of awe about the technology design, and I still find beauty in that. I'll give you one other, by the way, the ATM machine. We press those buttons. They're a control interface. One of the things that we love to do at Lux is try to identify these directional arrows of progress. And it's an important theme because the directional arrow of progress might be in markets, what's happening in markets, what's happening in the world of venture capital, what's likely to happen in technology. It doesn't tell us who the entrepreneur is or what the company is, but I have a high level of confidence, not certainty, but confidence that something is going to develop this way. And I'll give you two examples of that. Okay. But it also plays into geopolitics because you have a feeling that there's this directional inevitability of the relations between people, between countries, of where there might be instability that is rising and where there might be opportunities for alliances. So maybe we talk about that. But we had this instinct. I'll give you one in energy and one in computing about a directional arrow of progress. And I think it's a secret for anybody listening when they think about, if I wanted to go into a field, if I wanted to invest in a field, what should I do? When I was growing up, my mother in the 80s wanted me to learn Japanese because it was rising Japan, and learn golf because that was the lingua franca of business. I didn't do either. And neither,
I didn't do either.
Right, and neither became really relevant. Now, fast forward a generation, most of my peers were telling their kids, you need to learn Mandarin.
Yes, Chinese, the simplified Chinese. Yeah.
And you need to learn computer science. And the argument is actually, if computer science is getting really good, you don't need to learn Mandarin because you can use Google Translate and some of the AI today to be able to communicate with people.
Yes, but you need to speak the language also. No, I think, so AI made language learning, like human language learning, easier, but you still have to learn the language. So, okay, so I get your point, but I'm just telling you, some people would counter what you said with lots of things that are just, especially when it comes to screenwriting, because even in Egypt, I do remember that there was like a union that they made protests that. And also when it comes to writing the scripts, and the scripts are poor, and so many good scripts that were produced into movies turned out to be AI.
But isn't that the thing ultimately, that it's still the human judgment, the discernment of quality, that something is good or something's not? There are tons of action movies that are produced on low budget with special effects, and nobody wants to see them.
Yes.
Right? But it's the great storytelling that leaves you with this feeling of like, you got to see, like the way that I was just talking about this movie Warfare, like you got to go see this.
I will see it.
So the two things I was going to tell you very quickly.
Yes.
Directional arrow of progress. One was in energy. Mankind's march of energy went from carbohydrates, wood and fields of fuel, to hydrocarbons, oil and gas, to now uranium. Nuclear, or as I like to call it, elemental energy. Because if it was discovered today, people would be like, my God, this is amazing. And the UAE actually, I think, can play a very important global role in nuclear energy.
There is a nuclear, like a Baraka, a nuclear reactor, but it's, of course, for peaceful purposes.
I spent some time with the leadership at IHC, and I believe that they are in a very privileged position. And they need some key pieces of technology, and I think that they will end up getting it, to help do the construction and development globally of nuclear. And I think it's a really important thing geopolitically because the U.S. has 104 reactors. There's about 440 globally. But China, which is a main adversary geopolitically, is developing many nuclear reactors, and they're developing in parts of the world proximate to water where they will create decades-long dependencies on maintenance and fuel that is not in U.S. or allied interest for them to do. And I do think that you will see the U.S., the UAE, and others team to create some global nuclear power consortia for peaceful purposes. But I think that there's an opportunity there. That's one directional arrow of progress. Carbohydrates to hydrocarbons to uranium. The trend, more and more energy density per unit of raw material. So that's not deniable. It's like you want to go and do biofuels or solar, that's great. But this is the directional arrow of progress. The other example, going back to the ATM, the way that we used to interact with computers, like the example of pulling our levers in the telephony example of phone operators, you used to have to go up to a giant ENIAC computer, one of these large mainframes, 25 years later, you're now on a desktop with a tower and a mouse and a keyboard. 12 and a half years later from that, now you have a laptop and it's touching your thighs and the mouse gives way to a trackpad. And then another half-life, another 6 years later, now it's your phone. 18 hours a day cradled in your hand, you're swiping and you're touching. Then you have an Apple iWatch and AirPods. So the directional arrow of progress is that computing is coming closer and closer to you. So one of the insights we had is, what's next? And we end up meeting this computer scientist and a neuroscientist who decide that the way that we're going to interact with our computing in the future is by just gesturing. You're not going to swipe, touch. You're not going to. Why are there buttons on it?
Maybe you'll have something in your eyes, like a screen or so, and you can just do that.
Like Minority Report, but without the gloves.
Minority Report.
And so we end up backing this guy, Reardon. He's like a sci-fi character. He actually created Internet Explorer at Microsoft. He starts this company called Control Labs. We become one of his lead investors. I join the board, and he ends up selling to Meta because Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want to be remembered for destroying democracy or for reinventing advertising. He wants to be remembered for reinventing computing. And so they buy this company. It's a non-invasive, not like Neuralink, brain-machine interface, basically a wristband that can detect your intentions to move your 15 muscles that innervate your that are innervated by about 14,000 neurons. And so if you wanted to turn on Spotify, you go like this. You want to raise the volume, you make a gesture like this. Swipe to the next song, all in free space, without a camera looking at you for motion detection, like a Xbox controller or something like that. This is the future of compute. But that was an insight that we got from this directional arrow of progress. So all we do as venture capitalists is try to understand what are these directional arrow of progresses, and then try to find the company of the entrepreneur that embodies that.
Okay, so I have a hypothetical question now. When it comes, this might be a silly question as well. You said you play games, right?
Yes.
You're so into games. So have you heard of a game that's called Detroit Become a Human?
Detroit
Become a Human.
No.
So it's a very nice game.
What's the platform?
So the platform is it's on PlayStation, and also I think it's also on Steam. If you're
Yes,
Steam,
yes.
So Detroit Become a Human is similar to also the movie Terminator.
Yes.
So it talks about an incident that happened in Detroit in 2000, I think 20 or no, not 20, I think 50 something, and no 2127, something like that.
Somewhere in the future.
Somewhere in the future, not in the near future, somewhere in the future, where AI or machines become so, how to say this, they are so intelligent that they can make decisions, and then they clash with humanity in some sort of an incident in Detroit. It's a very nice game. I highly recommend that you play it. So do you think, also related to Terminator, because Terminator 2 was one of my favorite movies, and I watched it when I was a kid and I didn't understand a thing about it. I didn't see that it was talking about AI and the future and everything, but the visuals were so good. By the way, speaking of visuals, so Terminator 2 Judgment Day, it talks about a war that is inevitable in the future between AI and mankind. I know it's a silly question, but you think it's going to happen sometime soon?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
There will be conflicts. Look, on a
But we will not be destroyed as a race.
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
But there will be conflict that would reach wars?
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, let's
Wow.
just
You really believe it?
let's just zoom out philosophically. The first conflict is over jobs.
Mhm.
That computers and intelligent machines and AI can replace jobs. We've already discussed that. It's great. It's happening. And it's one of these things that happens subtly and slowly. The second thing are that when you say our species, will it destroy our species? There are going to be small civil wars in our species between early technology adopters who are advantaged
Mhm.
and those who are not. It's sort of a clash of civilizations.
Mhm.
You and I right now are amplified and augmented by technology. We have microphones that are picking up and amplifying our voice. We have cameras that are capturing our presence right now and able to scale that globally. We are advantaged relative to somebody that does not have high definition cameras, does not have internet to be able to send those pixels, does not have the microphones with the high fidelity. So we are already technology augmented and advantaged relative to somebody in just this parochial small example of a video podcast where we're discussing the future of technology in regions. But then think about the people who live in cities where they have 24/7 delivery vehicles and the productivity of commerce is increasing. If you've ever spent time in the Midwest or down south where you're in a rural place and you need to get something versus the density and the high kinetic vibrancy of a city, those are in themselves sort of clash of civilizations predicated on
technology closing time and distance for people to get what they want or deliver what they have. And so all of these things, just zooming out into a practical sort of philosophical take, are that the people who adopt and use technology are already advantaged and amplified relative to those who don't. You can learn languages, you can accelerate your connectivity, you can create more optionality for you and your family being globally connected than the person that doesn't have those things. And so that's the first sort of battle, is between people that have technology and people that don't. Then the next one.
But that's not lethal.
No, it's not lethal, but actually it is lethal. I mean, think about somebody that is going to war. The person throwing a rock versus the person with a precision-guided missile. The person with drone surveillance to have situational awareness over a region versus the person that's using binoculars, if that, which itself is an augmentation of eyes. So technology has always given superior capability to people in warfighting, in communications, in governing. I mean, we thought technology would be this great democratizing force in China, for example. And I think people were surprised over the past 10 years that it can be used for autocracy, for surveillance, for control, for creating incentive systems where people adhere to social principles. And if they don't, they lose points. And if they do, then they gain points. And those points can be used to get access to the subways or to sporting events and tickets and schools. And so, you know, if you've seen Black Mirror, these things used to be, you know, and of course, Black Mirror being your phone when it turned off, right? But they used to be these far prognostications about what might happen in the future, but they feel very real today, increasingly. And that gap, again, between sci-fi and sci-fi are shrinking. But technology will create conflicts between people that are set in a way and people that want to advance and adapt the future. It is lethal in the form of military campaigns and technology. I would make the argument, and this is an interesting debate, that the more technological precision you have, the more moral precision you can have. What do I mean by that? In World War II, when the United States had developed the atomic bomb and dropped it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, and or firebombed cities, hundreds of thousands of people were killed. Today, the ability to use a drone to take out a single car and leave with a bad person inside who intends to do bad things, or for somebody with visual surveillance to be able to do the moral discrimination between somebody with an AK-47 going to shoot up a girl's school or somebody with a pickaxe that's coming from a farm going back home is a really important distinction.
Yes.
It's one that allows heightened moral precision for more, quote-unquote, just wars. And so, yes, technology can do a lot of bad things, but I actually think that there's a positive moral dimension.
But a war, Josh, a war between machines and mankind.
Yes.
Would that reach a place somewhere? I mean, like, would that happen like in 100 years or less?
Yes. And again, yeah, I'm going to go back for 1 second. You mentioned Detroit before in the game, and I remember
Detroit Become Human. You have to play it.
Yes, I will. I will.
You have to play it.
There was a war in the economic sense between humans that were designing cars, and suddenly Japan comes and starts with some of these systems and automation, and now most of our cars are made entirely by robots. Okay, and so robots beat humans that were assembling. That was an economic war. Was it kinetic? In a sense, physically doing stuff. Was it killing somebody? No. Now, here's the interesting question. Do wars become more likely when you have robots that are fighting robots? Because it's not just robots fighting humans. If there isn't death, if there isn't suffering, if there isn't human tragedy, do wars become more likely? And I actually think that the interesting philosophical question is that they probably do. Because when you have mechs versus mechs, or machines versus machines, or drones versus drones, it doesn't invoke the same sort of moral feeling of seeing somebody that was killed. And so I think that more than having machines versus people, which we already do, a machine gun or a tank versus a human with a rock is already outmanned, literally the word outmanned. But to have machines versus machines is not only an inevitability, and in a sense already here, thinking about Ukrainian drones attacking Russian tanks, but will war become more likely when the human cost is lower? And that's a really profound question.
Okay, what prevents, just to simplify to the audience, what prevents like a robot of having his own mind, of doing this or that?
I think that there will be kill switches not only in terms of software, but there will be, in many cases, and I've been amazed at this being involved with special forces in the U.S., they actually have humans in the loop by legal decree. So there might be a drone operator that is flying a drone for surveillance. There might be a drone operator that is there to press the button to say go, and there's a commander that is giving that authorization. But there are also lawyers which blew my mind, that there are lawyers in these setups remotely in foreign locations to decide whether it is moral and just and legally permissible to take that shot. So one part of it will be human in the loop. One part of it will be corrective code on top of these things. And one part will be the ability to actually pull the plug, because all technology still needs something, which we need, but in different form, which is power and electricity.
Okay. So we're talking about now AI also. We're keeping on that. When it comes to our MENA region, the Middle East, of course, you've been visiting a lot, Saudi Arabia, UAE.
So bullish.
Okay. So I just want to know what are your thoughts about the trends that are happening right now? Where are they headed? I think Saudi, UAE, and Israel are leading the high tech. If you would sort them from 1 to 3, what would be your sort? And also, how do you see it going forward? Where do you think the most investment would be in?
I hope it is by a tripartite group between those three. There's some geopolitical things that have to happen. There was a military and technology scholar, I believe, Dima Adamski. I'm not sure if that's the right name, but out of Israel, who made this comparison between Israel, the U.S., and Russia, and respectively, Apple, Xerox PARC, Apple, IBM, and Xerox PARC. Here's the analogy. Russia created, and I'm going to then connect this to UAE and Saudi. Russia created the revolution in military affairs, which was the doctrine, the philosophical idea of adopting new technologies in war. So they were sort of, think of it like the academic think tank that came under that. The U.S. was the bureaucracy that had the means, the money, the men, the military to be able to go and instantiate that and make it so. And that was sort of IBM. IBM was bureaucratic. They were big. They had the money. They had the resources. They had the talent, but they weren't very creative inventing. Apple was Israel. Apple was under-resourced, faced existential threat from its competitors and neighbors, and out of necessity was very much, ready, fire, aim. Israel faced existential threat out of necessity, which is always the mother of invention, needed to come up with all kinds of new technologies. The Predator drone in war today really came from an Israeli founder, entrepreneur, Aid Karam, who developed this thing that at the time was called Amber, ultimately was repurposed because of the U.S. CIA.
You talked about it on one of your tweets, I think.
He used to work with us, Jim Wolfe. He was the former head of the CIA, and he had greenlit Aid Karam and turned Amber into what General Atomics would ultimately create as the Predator and Reaper, the arsenal-equipped one. But those things were developed out of necessity. And there are so many technological innovations that are developed out of necessity for the very same reason that somebody in the military campaign does what an entrepreneur does. And I always say they ask the two most important words in any domain for an entrepreneur: what sucks? Because anybody that understands what sucks says, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to make it better. And a lot of people consider that arrogance of the highest order. But it is the thing that precedes the creation of a great new technology or a great new company. What sucks? And somebody says, I'm going to go fix that. So Israel has had to, out of necessity, invent for security, for economic. And then you look at what they have done with this land in the region. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And how much we depend upon semiconductors and software and cybersecurity and the ability to grow agriculture and genetics. And it's very inspiring.
When I went to Israel for the first time, I went to, I think there was a center called Rabin, I think. No, not Rabin. I think, what's the name? Peres Center.
Yes.
Peres Center. And Peres Center, they have a section that shows you what Israel gives to the world.
Yes.
So USB, Waze, cherry tomato.
Yes.
And ICQ and stuff. And it was like phenomenal. But then I think about it and say, well, it's out of necessity. Yeah. It's like they have to survive.
Yes.
And when you are under real tremendous pressure, it's almost like like the mother of all innovations, as you said. So it's also for security.
Yes.
But Saudi Arabia and UAE, they don't have this kind of like threats, I would say. But they are moving forward because they want to detach themselves from oil. The vision of 2030 in Saudi is like detaching Saudi Arabia from oil, and also the UAE. So did you notice some sort of trends or things that are happening or moving to the right direction?
Huge.
Okay.
First of all, I would say less me complimenting, more me feeling
No, observing, just
no, but more me feeling a sense of ignorance of how fast this has been happening. Okay, for UAE, spending time in Abu Dhabi in particular, inspired by a few things. One was seeing how smart and savvy leadership, and in particular Tanoon, Abdul bin Zayed, Sheikh Abdul, to help bring some of the great institutions from around the world to set up there. And everything from art institutions, the Louvre from Paris, the Guggenheim from the US, Hopkins, Cleveland Clinic, NYU, these great institutions of academic learning and research, or hospital and medical care, of art and culture, bringing it there, forgetting about the restaurants and the hotels and all that, like the hospitality. It's just, that was inspiring, number one. Number two, which had a profound effect on me, was post-Abraham Accords, where ABZ played a very key role. Visiting the Abrahamic family house, to see these three institutions through history, and this idea of coexistence, the idea of mutual respect,
yes,
the idea of the materials and the measurements of each, of the mosque and the synagogue and the church, all in proportion to each other. It was absolutely symbolic, signal, beautiful.
and it tells a lot about how we see the future with tolerance and coexistence and no hate. This is the most important, in my opinion, also.
And if you are not you think about the thing that makes Silicon Valley so productive. Yes, people in New York that are Yankees fans might have an animus against the Boston Red Sox, or the Celtics versus the Knicks, or the Knicks versus the Lakers. But this is a playful animus. But the collaboration you have between people is what allows for prosperity. And increasingly, as you get more and more technologically sophisticated domains, the low-hanging fruit, the things that are on the surface, just like in resource extraction, become harder. And you need more global collaboration. You need more teamwork. So I know that there are people in Saudi that say, why do we have to go all the way to Silicon Valley when we've got Tel Aviv right there? Why can't we have this more proximate?
We need to have peace.
Yes. Yeah. And so that means transcending the hatred and the religious differences, and thinking about where can we have, in the Abrahamic sense, these shared values towards shared prosperity. And that to me is a beautiful thing. So seeing the mobilization of resources, the planning, listening to ABZ talk about, particularly sort of post-COVID, the reforms that were made on a variety of things, from religious to bureaucracy. It was like, to me, it was almost like a Doge campaign. Like, we're going to get rid of this, and we're going to make this simpler, and we're going to make this but it was all done very practically and considerate. And I found him in particular to be one of the most wise, erudite, thoughtful, long-term planners. And if we had more leadership like that here in the United States, it would be just massively inspiring.
So I'm so happy that you're so optimistic also about what you've seen in the region. And I believe, Josh, honestly, we are getting to a region one day, inshallah, that we will worry about in the Middle East, not about wars or conflicts. We would be worried about who's creating more graphic chipsets in the region. Oh, it's Israel or UAE or Saudi Arabia. I think we're getting there. We just need to transcend.
Spending time with Tanoon.
Sheikh Tahnoun, yes.
And I went with my partner, Brett McGurk, who has been a lifelong diplomat, first in the
Bush administration also.
Bush, Obama, Trump. He pulled out of Trump administration because he was part of the counter-ISIS coalition in combating violent extremists through the region. And Trump had very surreptitiously sort of pulled out of Syria, and he had promised the Kurds military support and aid, and that became a sticking point because he sort of fell on his sword after not being able to deliver. He went back in the private sector, worked with some of the Lux companies, and then went back in Biden, and then ended with the capstone hostage deal with Israel and Hamas. And he accompanied me to the region maybe 2 months ago, the first week of April, And
And one of your photos went so viral, by the way.
with Tanu, or with
With
the Crown Prince.
was it Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, which was very special. And another human who I am so inspired by, how young and thoughtful he is. And I understand the difference between the ability to have 1.5 million Emiratis with
20 million Saudis.
and it's a more complicated situation in Saudi to move people
Yes.
as quickly as UAE can. And being the keeper of Mecca and Medina is a more
Custodian, yeah, the custodian of the two holy mosques, yes.
It's a more complicated thing that requires a thoughtful deliberation, because nobody wants to see a 1979 Tehran uprising.
Yes.
Nobody wants to see somebody empowered to say you are betraying, so it will take thoughtful consideration, but I can see the vision that these leaders have, and it's a vision that we want to be part of.
I think Prince Mohammed also is a part of his vision, in my opinion, is because he's a gamer.
Yeah.
You know that he said that in one of the interviews.
When I was talking to him, I said, Call of Duty? He said, no shooting, but yes.
Let me guess. Strategy games.
Yeah, strategy games.
Strategy games. Okay. So gaming is really like beneficial. I will say to those who mock me and say, you spend so much time on Steam. Habibi, tara Steam games make you. I love, for example. Okay, I love simulation.
Yes, for flying.
Yeah, flight simulator. I also love. There are also other simulators like PC building simulators, and also I do some shooting games. Yeah,
I think
I do some shooting.
I allow my kids to play everything. I grew up on a ton of video games, watching a ton of TV.
What is your best of the best video game?
It's a weird one, because I love sports games.
Okay.
Because the repetition of when you lose in forget about open world shooters, but I love sports games because you're able to compete with a friend in a way that is just and I love playing with my son. So we play NBA 2K, we play Madden,
NFL.
Yes, and I happen to love all of the Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh,
because the
new ones,
particularly in New York City, where you are flying through these very simulated,
mapped very well.
And it's like, you go to your neighborhood, I'm like, it looks like our neighborhood.
Yes. So to me, is my favorite. I don't know if you know it or not. It's called Metal Gear Solid.
Yes.
Solid Snake.
Yes.
It's spectacular.
But that's a franchise that almost 30 years.
Yeah, but it's still going, and there are still some
amazing.
Some remakes.
Incredible.
Back to Sheikh Tahnoun, when you met with him, what was like if I ask you, what was the thing that stuck in your top of your head after you met with him, and he said, "Wow, that was a vision that I will never forget"?
First of all, the first thing we spoke about was, I think Grok 3 had just come out, and says Elon's, and there are people in the US that are sophisticated AI people that did not have the level of grasp and understanding of where that sat on benchmarks relative to other large language models. So I walked away instantly, as related to specifically that narrow part of AI, that this is not something where, we want to be investors. We are going to shape the future of AI, was the sense that I got. That not only was it going to be investments into the leading companies and into the funds, but it was going to be both geopolitically important of what companies were going to be able to come there, whether there would be compute infrastructure there, the coordination of both MGX and G42 and IHC. It was a methodically thought out long-term plan.
Yes.
To not just play in AI, and I mean this in a positive way, but to dominate, to win. He struck me as a compassionate competitor, somebody that had a great moral sense, but was not there to play, but to play to win. And I admired that a lot.
Yeah, and the UAE has has a ministry for AI.
Yes,
and that is like pioneering.
And on the side, I play basketball, and I do skateboarding and snowboarding and jiu-jitsu. He's a black belt. I am not a black belt. But he invited me, and I'm terrified to roll jiu-jitsu with that.
Okay, so back to my so we're talking about education. So if someone was watching this interview, he saw like great massive info that you were saying now, Josh, and he said, okay, you know what, I'm a high school student, I want to study something in the university that would make me more into the AI game. What would you as Josh recommend? You computer science, software engineering, what kind of major I should be focused on?
The first thing I think is actually less technical and having a grasp of the history of technology. Because understanding these arcs of where things are likely to go and what the timeless aspects are, zooming out for a second, we are always going to have a need to communicate. We are always going to have a need to eat. We're going to have a need to be able to see near and far. We're going to have a need to be able to hear and amplify voices. So technologies that sort of augment the human experience, where AI, sensors, robotics will all play a role in that, I think is an important thing to understand. What are the baseline things that we will always need, that you can predict in 20 years or in 50 years we will still need? I just went to a heavy metal concert two weeks ago.
Where?
In New York. It's a band called the Deftones and another band called Mars Volta. I like
We were
weird.
trying to do heavy metals. I couldn't.
I like everything. I like jazz, pop.
Jazz is fine.
Yeah.
It's heavy metal now.
By the way, speaking of music, the Berkeley School of Music, which is a very prominent in the northeastern U.S., is in Abu Dhabi.
Yes.
And I know that there's a upcoming cultural event, I think in later April, where a friend of mine, Steve Drobny, and the head of the Berkeley School of Music, which was a longtime friend of his, they're bringing Herbie Hancock and all these famous jazz musicians. So going back to what we were talking before about the assemblage of these great cultural institutions
Yes.
and putting seeds there, it's super inspiring. So the first thing I would do is understand the arc of technology history. Don't just read the latest thing. If you were reading 5 years ago, it would have been like Super Intelligence by Nick Bostrom about how AI was going to kill us all or something like that. Like, understand the arc. The person that I really like here that I would recommend, Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly was a longtime editor of Wire magazine, never went to college, traveled the world, but is one of the great philosophers of the arc of technology. And he's written books like What Technology Wants, Out of Control. You can look up the others, but there's a timeless arc which has inspired me to find those timeless arcs, even though I don't know what the next technology is going to be. So that's number one. The second is always to follow the smartest people. Now, the smartest people can sometimes go into really dumb areas, but if you follow the smartest people, you see their own instincts born out of their own ambitions to make money, to be famous, to start a company, to have freedom, whatever it is. And if you follow that, follow the talent, the capital and everything else flows. So that would be a second thing in deciding, where do I want to invest my human capital as a student to go after these things? The third thing, which is something that is cliched, is, people say follow your passion. But if there are things that you're obsessed with, that you can't stop thinking about because you saw it in a sci-fi movie or in a video game, and you're like, I want that to be real. Some of the best entrepreneurs that we've ever backed were inspired by something that they cannot shake, and that they have the permission, whether from parents or a friend or a mentor, to go and do. And that's the most important thing, rather than saying like, oh, I should go into quantum computing, because people are talking about that, which I'm very skeptical about. But
You're skeptical about it.
I'm skeptical about quantum computing. Most of the things that anybody ever prophesied about quantum computing, unbreakable encryption and molecular modeling for drug design, many of those things have happened, but they've happened with GPUs and AI, not with quantum computers. So I'm a little bit skeptical about that. It's one of those technologies that for 20 years is always, 5 years away, and just, I think, going to perennially be that way. But I think that those are the three things I would do. So understand the arc of technology. Okay. Follow the really smart people. And if there's something inside you that is just, there's no greater probability of success than when you have a really strong passion to pursue something.
I agree. I totally. My background is, by the way, software engineering, and I did good in software engineering. I made good money, honestly, when I sell some software. But there is something deep down that tells me that I love to speak to an audience, and I love to do lots of.
And you are a great communicator.
Thank you so much.
Hear technology.
Exactly. This is what I say. So I'm still doing lots of how to say programming, especially with Python, and it needs lots of great GPUs. And this is why I'm so happy that I finally got my hands on the NVIDIA 5080. It was I really suffered in getting my hands on the new NVIDIAs or the new graphics cards, and I believe they are the brains, and they are amazing, and you can do a lot of things to achieve it. But I was asking, why? Because I told some of my friends that I'm going to meet with you, and they were saying that if I was a student or my kid, and I want someone like Josh, a brilliant guy, AI savvy, and I want him to give an advice to my kid, like this is something that we are used to in the Arab world, to bring an expert and say, you know what, your kid should do computer science. Your kid should focus on computer engineering. Your kid should do software engineering is the future. Computer science is the future. Whatever, with major. If it was a one magic word, if you have a magic wand and we say, your kids should study this and that, what would be the technological major?
It's interesting because the major I would give you is not technology.
What is it?
Human psychology.
But it's irrelevant to what we're.
No, it's the essence of what to understand.
Really? But to AI, it's not. No.
There are two adjacent questions.
Okay.
The thing that I think people should study, and I studied it by reading Steven Pinker and Richard Dawkins and people that were studying cognitive neuroscience. But why do we do the things we do? Being able to read people in my world, it's not just the assessment of a technology, it's an assessment of the entrepreneur and their ambitions. When somebody comes in and says, I just want to change the world, I say BS. I don't believe that. But if you tell me that you were the kid in a neighborhood that was picked on, or your father left when you were young and you have a chip on your shoulder, I always say that chips on shoulders put chips in pockets. And to have that sort of psychological understanding of what motivates somebody, you can get it by studying psychology and neuroscience. You can get it by watching lots of movies to understand characters. You can read fiction, you can read Shakespeare, but there are timeless arcs of human stories where you can understand their characters. That to me is really important, even in a high-tech world, to understand what drives people, their motives, their incentives, their biases, their desire for fame, their desire for vengeance, their jealousies.
That's good, Joshua, but that doesn't land them in job markets.
No, it doesn't land them in job markets. To be competitively positioned in any market, whether you're an athlete or technology, you have to be distinguished. You have to read voraciously. You have to understand what everybody else understands, and then have a little bit of the comfort to take a risk and make a declaration of what you think is going to happen next. So right now, for my kids, I'll give you an example because I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old girl and a 9-year-old son. They are playing with AI of every kind. They're on Claude 3.7. They're on OpenAI 4.0 and 4.5. They're on Midjourney. My 9-year-old can conjure all kinds of things. He loves Kendrick Lamar. He loves hip hop. He loves basketball. And he'll start with little things like Kendrick with his hair on fire or whatever, and he'll be able to prompt. So in a sense, to your point about being a prompt engineer, but that is transient because soon everybody will be able to do that. And the things that are a little bit hard today to use Midjourney, you can see Midjourney is increasingly getting easier with their user interface. In the same way, like HTML coding 25 years ago was hard, and then it was basically a point-and-click GUI, a graphic user interface, where you didn't actually need to know code. Today, some of the top coders in AI are saying it's all about vibe coding, where you can literally talk to the computer. You don't need to know Java or C++ or PyTorch or Python. You can increasingly just talk to a company like ours, Cognition, which produced Devin, which is one of the coding agents. There's other companies that compete with them. But increasingly, you will need to be able to code yourself. You'll be able to need to direct the code. Just like today, I can't draw, but I can direct through prompts. Incredible, in my not so humble opinion, artistic pieces. Yesterday, I made a thing that I posted online, a prompt just thinking about a stock chart with red and green. But instead of it being a linear stock chart, I made it out of human dummies, like bodies dressed in red and green, as though it was an art installation in a museum.
And what did you use? What
I used Midjourney for that.
Midjourney, okay.
But I also went to OpenAI, ChatGPT 4.0, and had it help conjure the prompt. I found that the content violations are very high for GPT 4.0. If you take some other artist that you like and you say, describe this style so that I can remake it, it's very hard to navigate around, but Midjourney is a little bit better in being able to navigate around that for the moment. My kids are doing all of this stuff multimodal. They understand 11 labs and how you can train
your sound
to be able to reproduce it.
Beautiful.
They understand, importantly, that everything that they're listening and seeing may not be authentic, and knowing that there's a distinction between veracity and truth and something that was artificially generated, and having a little bit of skepticism to inoculate you like a vaccine from the information that you're getting and not always trust it. So right now I want them playing with everything, coding through vibes and natural language to produce an app, being able to mimic their own voice, being able to conjure pictures, being able to use ChatGPT for any query that they have, and understanding that the answer may be as reliable as a not so great intern. And then you have to do some secondary research and not just trust the platform.
Yes, but I'm using no AI, honestly, Josh, and this is something I believe could land you also a job in the market,
yes,
and also could open lots of doors. Developing games.
Yes.
So I do lots of Unreal Engine and ChatGPT. Oh my God, it's helped me a lot.
Incredible.
You can just prompt to ChatGPT, what does this command mean? Give me more info, give me more depth, and it makes things easier. And with games, games, I tell you why games are better than movies or visuals, because you can create interaction.
Yes.
So imagine if you create a first century Jerusalem and where you have a 3D character that walk around, and then you can do an interaction. It could be educational. It could be educational purposes. It could be a game that's just to immerse yourself into the atmosphere, and then you can visualize how the temple looked like, how old Jerusalem looked like, and things like that. And it's to me, it's like I advise people to learn gaming.
I love that. Can I tell you, by the way, we just did a family family trip 2 weeks in Japan, and we visited shrines and temples, and we went to Kyoto and Tokyo and Osaka. We came back, and it happened to have come out, I think, while we were away, but my son and I downloaded it on PlayStation 5.
What is it called?
Assassin's Creed Shadow.
Oh, I'm a big fan of all the Assassin's Creed games. Big fan from Assassin's Creed 2007, Assassin's Creed 1, Ezio Auditore.
Because there are historical
Research.
So
my God,
we're going through ancient Kyoto, and he's like, "Dad, were we there?" And I'm like, "Not exactly that place, but like it looks like it." But it connects this feeling of like you were physically there, but let alone, to your point, the people that couldn't physically be in ancient Jerusalem, you know,
or time travel.
There was a great line in a debate recently where Douglas Murray, who I admire a lot, he's like,
"You can travel, but you can't time travel."
You can't. He's like,
I love it. I love that.
Never get into Israel.
He roasted him, by the way. Oh my God, that bro. Okay, I'll have one final question, Joshua. Honestly, this talk about AI and everything, it makes so it gets how to say that, it time travels me to the days of my software engineering and everything, and I was doing a good job. So, if you could fast forward 5 years, what is the technological advancement you would want to see in the region, in the Middle East, or in the world? What would be the one thing that you say, I want to see that?
The thing that I believe is going to be the most profound, and part of me puts weight on this because not a lot of people talk about it yet. So if I was talking about something that everybody else was talking about, it's less valuable. This is the same thing for a parent who wants their student or their son or daughter to be distinguished. You have to understand what the consensus is and what everybody else is talking about. Then you must find what I call the variant perception, the thing that other people haven't yet appreciated. It is true if you were a real estate developer, finding the land or the neighborhood that hasn't been developed yet. It's true if you were a music producer, finding the sound, when everybody else is playing acoustic guitar and somebody goes to electric guitar, when everybody else is doing, disco music, you come up with EDM, when people are doing hip hop and rock and somebody merges metal and hip hop together and produces these new bands. If you're an art dealer and everybody's looking at this genre of art and you find the person in sub-Saharan Africa that's doing whatever it is, finding the thing that people haven't found yet. And I used to think it was like this virtuous pursuit of truth or knowledge. No, it's born in a competitive spirit. The social status you get and ultimately the money that you can make by finding something that other people haven't found yet. And when they do, you get the credit for it is really valuable. It's something you do in carving out a niche in your communications. You have a very unique voice amongst the noise of cacophony that is, I think, valuable and distinct and differentiated. So, long-winded answer to your question. The area of technology now that people are not really talking about is how you use AI and automation and robotics for the production of knowledge in science. Today, scientists are wearing white lab coats and they go into wet lab benches and they work in assays. I was a scientist, inspired, by the way, by a movie I saw on HBO in the early 90s about AIDS. And I said, I'm going to go cure AIDS.
Where is Philadelphia?
No, it was called And the Band Played On. It was an ensemble cast with all these famous actors.
The only AIDS movie I know is Philadelphia.
Which is a great one, and a sad one. It's like,
Denzel Washington.
You had the three big cultural things around AIDS were Philadelphia, Angels in America by the playwright Tony Kushner, and the Band Played On. And that inspired me in the early 90s.
To be a scientist.
To be a scientist, to go want to cure AIDS naively, which is the great thing. You want young people to be naive and to say, like, why, what if I could do that? That path ended up sending me to my mentor, who I was working on these physical centrifuges and pipetting AIDS blood into assays, 96 called enzyme-linked immunosorbent assays, and doing studies. My mentor was actually trading futures and options and making money in the stock market, which I didn't know anything about, and that set me on my path at the intersection between science and finance. Scientists today, scientists 30 years ago, are still mostly using the same equipment. They're using pipettes, they're using microscopes, they're using labs with beakers and titration. Increasingly, parts of that are being automated. Robots are doing the dull, dirty, in some cases dangerous things. They are taking cells, they're pipetting them automatically in mass. They're moving them with robotic handlers over to a machine. They're putting them in. So that's step one, automation of science in labs. Why? Because if you were a musician 20 years ago, you had to go rent time in a studio. You bring your instruments. You get your bandmates together. Maybe you record together or separately the different tracks. And then a producer would assemble those. And that's a time sequence, drum beat and guitar and vocal. And when it all comes in, just like, okay, now fast forward. Technology has democratized that. You and I could start a band, you in Abu Dhabi, me in New York City, and it would probably not be a good band. At least from my point, you might be more,
But if I had black metal, please.
but maybe, and by the way, when cultures come together like that, that's how you get new interesting stuff.
Of course.
But we could do that on GarageBand or Pro Tools or Logic, which is effectively near free for us, with instruments that are virtualized in silico, digital guitar, digital drums. I don't need the physical instruments. Now, what's the analogy? I don't have to go to a lab in the future. I can design in the Bahamas or on the beaches, Masha Beach. What's the beach?
Mamsha, Saadiyat Beach.
That's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful.
My favorite.
I could sit on the beach there and I could dial up an experiment. And that experiment could happen in Abu Dhabi. It could happen in Berlin. It could happen in Milwaukee, wherever there's a cloud lab, just like an Amazon Web Services, a cloud, to be able to host it in the cloud. The robots are running the experiment and it finishes the experiment. And then it has the results from the scientific experiment. And AI automatically generates a professional scientific paper. And then it looks at that scientific paper and the conclusion and the methods and the materials and everything that goes into a real scientific paper. And it can send it for peer review. And it finds, hey, there was a paper in 1979 and a paper in 1996. These might be spurious correlations, but there might be some interesting connection between these two different papers. Do you want to rerun the experiment, changing the titration or the amount there? And you just click in that reverse prompt on the beach. Yes. The machines run it overnight. So the production of science, which leads to the production of new knowledge in the form of new drugs for saving lives, of new materials that define everything around us, from our fabrics to our war systems to our furniture and building materials. The production of new knowledge between robots and AI in science is going to give huge advantage. $billion fortunes are going to be created by the entrepreneurs. Advantage will go to the cities and the countries that have this. So this, to me, is the domain that people are not talking about yet, is going to be really valuable, not only for humanity, but fortune making and influence creating for the companies and the countries and the individuals that are able to use AI plus robotics plus automation to generate new knowledge, patent that information, and produce new products.
Inshallah. And I hope it happens soon. And I also, when are you coming to the region again?
I will be there, I think, in 3 weeks.
In 3 weeks. So hopefully, in less than a year, we would travel together from Jeddah, my hometown, to Tel Aviv.
This would be amazing.
And then we'll go to Abu Dhabi.
Yes.
And maybe back to New York.
Yes.
We'll have a direct flight from New York.
We're planning our family vacation for December, and my hope is, I don't know if we'll have normalized relations between you,
Inshallah.
but we're going to go to UAE. My kids really want to go to, I tell them about Abu Dhabi, but they also want to go to Dubai.
You have to let me know. I want to make a prosperous tour.
It would be amazing. And visit Israel and visit Saudi. And
Where in Saudi Arabia?
I've been to Riyadh. I've not been to Jeddah yet, but I would love.
I'll be your tour guide in Jeddah. I'll show you around. Everything will be fine.
It would be amazing. But to go to KSA would be with the family.
You know. Last time I was in Jeddah, I attended the iftar by an amazing guy. His name is Badr Asakir. He is MBS private secretary. And after the iftar, I immediately left his house and I went to the airport. I wanted to fly to Israel, but I couldn't because there were no direct flights. So I had to go to Dubai, and I took a flight from Dubai, to Israel in Jerusalem for 24 hours. I was doing this. I was doing this video for the Museum of Tolerance in Jerusalem. Yes. I am the face now for the explaining the Muslim period in Jerusalem. But the fact that I when I left Jeddah, I was like, oh my God, I wish there was a direct flight, because I had to go for a layover for just like 6 hours and that. But eventually, so it happened.
So there's a place I think that just opened up thanks to Crown Birds MBS. Udun. That's like the old. It's almost like the Jordanian
Neil.
No.
Not Neil. It's like a what in a plug? A city or
Well, it's an ancient city, and it was always closed to visits. And
Al-Ula? Al-Ula.
maybe yes.
Al-Ula. Yeah, Al-Ula.
ULA.
Yeah.
Yes.
Al-Ula. Al-Ula, yeah. Al-Ula, it was inhabited by the Nabateans who started their kingdom in Petra. Yeah, I did lots of...
Right. It's like Petra.
It's like Petra.
Yes.
It's the same civilization that was...
Somebody was just telling me that you have to go in because eventually it's going to become a huge tourist thing, but not quite yet.
Yes. But it is attracting some tourists, but it's so beautiful. I've been there. First time I was there 2015, and also with the inscriptions of Al-Ula, they are written in ancient Arabic.
Wow.
That is not real, but it's so beautiful. And so Saudi Arabia is so it's a beautiful country that underrated by some, but inshallah soon we'll
I am so optimistic about the region, and we can't wait to do more.
inshallah. Josh Wolfe, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, great to be with you.
God bless you.